Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanov was born on June 18, 1901. She was the fourth daughter and the second youngest of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna, the last autocratic rulers of Imperial Russia. She was the younger sister of Grand Duchess Olga, Tatiana, and Maria, and the elder sister of the younger Alexei Tsarevich of Russia. She perished as a result of being executed by Bolshevik soldiers at 17 years old, along with the other members of the Russian imperial family. Persistent rumors about her potential survival have circulated since her death, however, fostered by the fact that the site of her grave was kept unknown during the decades of communist rule. During this time, several young women used the occasion to declare themselves Anastasia Romanov. It seemed that the rumors were almost certain when a mysterious woman, later identified as Anna Anderson, surfaced in Berlin and was admitted to a psychiatric ward only a few years later. The legend of the fugitive Grand Duchess and the idea that the mysterious woman could be none other than her ran throughout Europe and into the 1980s. But were the rumors true? The Romanov dynasty started on February 21, 1631, when Mikhail Fyodorich Romanov was elected unanimously as the Tsar of Russia by the country's parliament. The dynasty was the second to rule Russia in the country's history and was also the last. The only two Russian rulers who were given the title the Great, Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, were both from the Romanov dynasty. There were 65 Romanovs alive in 1917. But their influence over Russia would not last, as Russia's displeasure with the aristocracy grew rapidly. As a matter of fact, the last Tsar, Nicholas II, admitted that he was unprepared when he took the throne in 1849, a hindrance apparently self-evident to his people. The Russian people blamed the Romanovs for both the country's military ineptitude and the socioeconomic troubles within the working class as a result of the First World War. There was rampant inflation, and along with a spate of embarrassing losses suffered by the Russian army, the country started to question the Tsar's ability to be an effective leader. All the while, Tsar Nicholas II's youngest daughter, Anastasia Romanov, had a fairly modest childhood, in spite of her aristocratic background. Born Anastasia Nikolaevna near St. Petersburg on June 18, 1901, the young Grand Duchess would only spend 17 years with her family. Her parents and family were disappointed when Anastasia was born, as they had a fourth girl and not the desired male heir. Tsar Nicholas II went for a long walk to pull himself together before visiting Tsarina Alexandra and seeing the baby for the first time. Her name has many different meanings, including she who frees herself from the chains, or she will rise again. The youngest Grand Duchess was named this way because, in celebration of her birth, her father liberated a group of students imprisoned the previous winter. Another meaning of her name is of the resurrection, a coincidence often referred to when many discussed her possible survival later on. Living up to her aliases, Anastasia grew up as a lively and energetic child, described as short and prone to excess weight, with blue eyes and rusty blonde hair. Stubborn, mischievous, and cheeky, Anastasia was a wonderful mimic. With great comicality and piercing wit, the girl imitated exactly the speech and manner of the people around her. She was said to be cunning and watchful, and had a keen sense of humor. Unlike her sisters, she did not know the meaning of the word shyness. At once described as intelligent and gifted, Anastasia was nonetheless never much interested in school. On occasion, Anastasia would exceed the limits of acceptable behavior. She is known to have set the family record for punishments and was a real genius at playing pranks. Her own mother was her first teacher of prayers and spelling. She was closely related to her older sister, Maria, with whom she shared a room. They were together known in the palace as the Little Pair. They both visited wounded soldiers together during World War I and played with them at the hospital. Anastasia had a distinct personality from her feminine and well-behaved sisters. She would sometimes trip up the servants and prank her guardians. As a result, she would climb trees and refuse to come down. The one who could convince her to do so was her father Nicholas, But as she grew older, Anastasia's mischievous behavior waned. Anastasia's tenure in the Tsarskoye Palace was peaceful for a long time, but the growing bitterness throughout the working class soon led to a revolution against them and their associates. In February 1917, the family was made subject to house arrest. The following month, Tsar Nicholas stepped down from the throne. The Bolsheviks, whose revolution would ultimately establish Russia's ruling Communist Party, dispatched the Romanov dynasty to live in exile in a small house in the city of Yekaterinburg. The family was kept between 5 gloomy rooms under constant surveillance for 78 days. Their mother secretly sewed jewelry into their clothes in the event of an escape. While still young and vigorous, Anastasia and her siblings did not always comply with their captors' instructions. Upon peeking through the window against their will, both were shot from below. She survived that round of bullets. A laundress reported seeing Anastasia flashing her tongue at the chief of the firing squad, one of the men who was to be her killer. Her brother Alexei, the youngest of the 5, was particularly weak. He had been suffering from hemophilia, and doctors had previously said that he would not live to the age of 16. Under captivity, this now seemed imminent. His captors also grew increasingly paranoid about a possible royalty rescue mission and decided not to keep them locked up any longer. The family was led to the basement on the morning of July 17th. The doors were nailed shut behind them. The family of 4 girls and 1 boy were told to line up as if for a photo. Then a guard entered and sentenced them to death. The family blessed themselves, and the Tsar was shot at close range in the chest. A bloodbath ensued. Maria was shot in the thigh and was left bleeding until she was stabbed by the bayonet repeatedly in the chest. Due to the jewelry sewn into their clothes, the girls were briefly protected from bullets until they were finally finished off with 8-inch bayonets. Anastasia's sister, Tatiana, attempted to escape and was shot in the back of the head. Anastasia was reported to be the last to die. A tipsy guard attempted to finish her off with a bayonet to the chest, but it would be the head of the firing squad that took a gun to her head. Alexei met the same fate. The family burial site was hidden for 61 years after the execution. The anonymity of their burials and the news that the children had jewelry hidden in their clothes led some to believe that one of the infants could have escaped. Rumors spread, and fraudsters attempted to vindicate the royal fortune. Among Anastasia Romanov's most famous impostor was perhaps the case of an unstable young woman named Anna Anderson. A young woman jumped off a bridge in Berlin in 1920. Nevertheless, her suicide attempt turned out to be in vain, and she was rescued. Her background was uncertain, and she never talked about her past. The only thing they knew about her was that she was Russian due to her strong accent. Later, the woman, who became known as Anna Anderson, asserted that she was in fact the missing Romanov, sparking a firestorm of controversy at the time. Anna maintained that she saw her entire family being killed and knew that the end of the war was near. However, it seemed that fate smiled on her when a soldier had mercy on her soul and helped her escape. The so-called heiress then started to have her story told and managed to fool many people with her fanciful narrative. Many started to doubt if the story was true. In an interview in 1970, she stated, "Can you really prove to me who you are? You can believe it or not. It doesn't matter." When she died in 1984, DNA tests were taken, showing that Anna was not related to the Romanovs, but probably to a Polish worker named Franciszka Szankowski. Anna Anderson would eventually die in 1984, married to a man who referred to as Anastasia. Only in 2008 did the Anastasia mystery come to an end. Russian scientists disinterred the bones of a young man and a young girl in the city of Yekaterinburg. After DNA analysis, they concluded that those were the remains of Alexei and one of the Tsar's daughters. As it turns out, Anastasia and Maria died at similar ages, so the test findings were able to point out that the mortal remains buried there would be either the main character of the story or of her sister. Suffice to say, the young woman did not survive the massacre.